Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, this is a space dedicated to exploring the deeper questions of life, finding clarity in the chaos, and discovering practical wisdom for a more meaningful existence. We dive into philosophy, psychology, and ancient truths to help you navigate the modern world with more peace and less struggle. If that sounds like something you need, I invite you to subscribe and join our community of seekers. The hidden architecture of your mind, what Buddhism reveals about consciousness, death, and the life you're living right now. What if I told you that the question, where do you go after death, is actually the wrong question to ask? What if the real mystery isn't about some distant afterlife, but about something happening right now in this very moment that you've been completely blind to your entire life? Here's something that will shake you. You are not who you think you are. The person you call you, the one who wakes up every morning, makes decisions, experiences emotions, that person doesn't actually exist in the way you imagine. And once you understand this, everything changes. Not just your view of death, but your understanding of every single moment you're living right now. Stay with me, because what we're about to explore isn't just ancient philosophy. It's a precise, practical investigation into the structure of your own mind. And by the end of this journey, you'll see why the Buddhist approach to death and rebirth is actually the most radical psychological framework ever developed for understanding human consciousness. This isn't about belief, it's about direct observation. So let's begin by looking at something you've never truly examined, the nature of your own identity. Part 1. The illusion we live inside. Before we can talk about what happens after death, we need to confront something uncomfortable. We need to examine the foundational assumption that underlies every question about the afterlife. That assumption is simple. There is a you that exists, a continuous self that persists through time, and this self will somehow continue beyond the death of the body. This belief runs so deep that we rarely question it. It feels obvious, self-evident. When you look in the mirror, you see the same person you saw yesterday. When you recall your childhood, you feel connected to that child. There's a sense of continuity, a thread of identity running through your entire life. This thread feels real, solid, permanent. But what if this feeling of continuity is actually an elaborate construction? What if the self you believe in so completely is more like a story your mind tells itself, rather than an actual entity that exists? This isn't a new question. Philosophers have wrestled with it for millennia. René Descartes famously declared, "I think, therefore I am," trying to establish an unshakable foundation for existence. He believed that even if everything else could be doubted, the existence of the thinking self could not. The very act of thinking proved that a thinker existed. This idea became foundational to Western philosophy, establishing the notion of a subject, a witness, a self that stands apart from experience and observes it. But the Buddha took a radically different approach. Rather than trying to prove the existence of the self through logic, he encouraged direct investigation. He asked his students to look carefully at their own experience and see if they could actually find this self they believed in so strongly. This investigation is recorded in one of the most important discourses in Buddhism, the Anattalakkhana Sutta. In this teaching, the Buddha systematically examines the 5 aggregates that make up what we call a person: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. He asks whether any of these can truly be called a self. Take the body, which Buddhism calls form. Is your body truly you? You might instinctively say yes, but look closer. Your body is constantly changing. The cells that made up your body 7 years ago have almost all been replaced. The body you had as a child is dramatically different from the body you have now. If your body were truly yourself, truly under your control, you should be able to command it not to age, not to get sick, not to die. But you can't. The body follows its own laws, independent of what you might wish. What about feelings? Are your emotions the real you? Again, look at your direct experience. Emotions arise and pass away constantly. Joy turns to sadness, anger dissolves into calm, excitement fades into boredom. If these feelings were truly you, you should be able to hold on to the pleasant ones and permanently banish the unpleasant ones. But you can't. Feelings come and go according to conditions, not according to your wishes. Perceptions follow the same pattern. The way you perceive the world shifts constantly, based on your mood, your health, your past experiences. What seems beautiful one day appears ordinary the next. What once fascinated you now bores you. Your perceptions are not stable, not permanent, not under your ultimate control. Mental formations, the habits and tendencies of your mind, also change continuously. The interests you had as a teenager may have completely disappeared. The beliefs you held with certainty 10 years ago may now seem naive. Your personality itself shifts and evolves throughout your life. Even consciousness, that sense of awareness itself, is not constant. It flickers on and off. Every night, in deep sleep, consciousness disappears entirely, only to reappear in the morning. Between one thought and the next, there are gaps, moments where awareness shifts and changes. So if none of these elements is permanent, unchanging, or under your control, which one is the self? Where exactly is this you that you believe in so strongly? Here's what makes this investigation so powerful. You don't need to believe anything. You can verify it directly. Right now, in this moment, try to find something in your experience that is truly unchanging. Look for something that remained exactly the same from moment to moment. You won't find it. What you'll discover instead is a constant flow, a river of experience that never stands still. Thoughts arise and dissolve. Sensations appear and fade. Emotions swell and subside. There is movement, process, flow, but no fixed entity that you can point to and say, "This is me. This is the real self behind all these changes." This doesn't mean you don't exist. That would be another extreme, another misunderstanding. You clearly have experiences, make choices, interact with the world. But what you are is not a thing, not an entity, not a soul. What you are is a process, a dynamic flow of physical and mental events arising in dependence on causes and conditions. Think of it like a flame. A candle flame appears to be a single continuous thing, but actually it's a constant process of combustion. The flame from one moment ago is not the same flame as the one burning now. New wax is being consumed. New energy is being released. The flame is not a thing. It's an event, a happening. Yet it maintains a recognizable pattern, a continuity that allows us to speak of it as the same flame. In exactly the same way, you are not a thing, but a process. There is continuity, yes. There are patterns that persist. But these patterns are not evidence of an unchanging self. They are simply the result of causes and conditions playing out over time. But once you see through the illusion of a fixed self, something profound happens. The fear doesn't necessarily disappear immediately, but it loses its absolute grip. You begin to understand that what you've been trying so desperately to protect was never really there in the first place. You've been fighting to preserve a ghost, to hold on to a shadow.
This brings us to the crucial point. If there is no permanent self, what exactly continues after death? If the you believe in doesn't exist in the way you thought, then the question, where do you go after death, becomes much more complex. It's not about a soul leaving the body and traveling to another realm. It's about understanding what actually continues when this process we call a person comes to an end.
Part 2. The force that shapes everything. Now we arrive at one of the most misunderstood concepts in all of Buddhism, karma. In popular culture, karma has become a simplistic idea of cosmic justice, a sort of universal scoreboard where good deeds are rewarded and bad deeds are punished. You hear people say things like karma will get them, or that's good karma coming back to you, as if there's some invisible judge keeping track of moral points. But this superficial understanding completely misses the profound psychological insight at the heart of the Buddhist teaching. Karma is not about reward and punishment. It's about the fundamental way that consciousness shapes itself through intention. In the Anguttara Nikaya, one of the earliest Buddhist texts, the Buddha made this crystal clear. He said, "It is volition, monks, that I call karma. Not action itself, but the intention behind the action." This is crucial to understand. Karma is not about what you do on the outside. It's about what happens inside your mind in the moment before you act. Every action begins with a mental impulse, a movement of intention. This intention, called cetana in Pali, is the seed of karma. It's the subtle but decisive moment when the mind inclines in a particular direction. Before you speak, there's an intention to speak. Before you reach for something, there's an intention to reach. Before you think a particular thought, there's an intention that sets that thought in motion. These intentions are not always conscious. In fact, most of them operate below the threshold of awareness. They arise so quickly, so habitually, that we rarely notice them. But they are always there, shaping the direction of our mental and physical actions. Here is where it gets interesting. Every time you act with a particular kind of intention, you reinforce that pattern in your mind. You create a groove, a pathway that becomes easier to follow the next time. If you consistently respond to frustration with anger, then anger becomes your default response. The neural pathways associated with angry reactions become strengthened through repetition. The next time a frustrating situation arises, your mind automatically flows down that familiar channel. On the other hand, if you consistently respond to challenges with patience and equanimity, those qualities become strengthened. The pathways associated with calm, measured responses become more developed. Your mind begins to naturally incline toward patience rather than reactivity. This is not mystical, it's completely observable in your own experience. Think about learning any skill. When you first try to play a musical instrument, every movement is awkward and requires conscious effort. But with practice, the movements become automatic. Your fingers know where to go without conscious thought. You've created strong neural pathways through repetition. Karma works the same way, but with mental and ethical patterns rather than physical skills. Every moment of generosity makes generosity easier. Every moment of honesty strengthens honesty. Every moment of compassion deepens compassion. But equally, every moment of greed strengthens greed. Every moment of deception makes lying more natural. Every moment of cruelty hardens the heart. The Buddha compared this to a compass being calibrated. Through repeated actions and intentions, your mind's compass becomes set. It begins to point in a particular direction automatically. This is not about being rewarded or punished by some external force. It's about the natural consequences of repeatedly directing your consciousness in certain ways. Let's take a concrete example. Imagine someone cuts you off in traffic. In that moment, you have a choice about how to respond. You could notice a flash of irritation, but let it pass. Perhaps even generate a thought like, I hope that person is okay. Maybe they're dealing with an emergency. Or you could grab onto the irritation, feed it, let it grow into full-blown anger, and spend the next 10 minutes cursing and fuming. The external event is the same in both cases, but the internal response is completely different. And here is the key. Whichever response you choose, you are reinforcing a pattern. You are training your mind to react in a particular way. You are setting your compass. If you choose the angry response, you are literally strengthening the neural networks associated with anger and reactivity. You are making it more likely that you will respond with anger the next time something frustrating happens. You are cultivating anger as a habit, as a way of being in the world. If you choose the patient response, you are strengthening completely different networks. You are teaching your mind that frustration doesn't have to automatically lead to anger. You are cultivating patience, resilience, and emotional flexibility. This happens with every single moment of intention throughout your day. Every small choice is either strengthening wholesome patterns or unwholesome ones. This is the real meaning of karma, the gradual shaping of consciousness through repeated intention. But we need to be very careful not to misuse this teaching. The Buddha was explicit that not everything that happens to us is the result of our karma. In the Savaka Sutta, he listed multiple factors that affect our experience: biological factors, environmental conditions, accidents, natural processes. Karma is one factor among many, not the only factor. This is critically important because the doctrine of karma has sometimes been twisted to blame people for their suffering. You hear tragic stories of people saying things like, you must have done something terrible in a past life to deserve this, or your poverty is your own karmic fault. This is a complete corruption of the Buddhist teaching. The Buddha specifically warned against this kind of thinking in the Kalama Sutta. He told his students not to accept teachings just because they are traditional or widely repeated. Instead, observe directly which intentions lead to suffering and which lead to peace, which actions create harm and which create well-being. Use your own wisdom and experience as the guide. Karma is not about judging others or yourself. It's not about explaining why bad things happen. It's about understanding the relationship between intention and the shaping of consciousness. It's about recognizing that you have agency, that your choices matter, that the quality of your mind is not fixed, but can be developed and refined. The purpose of understanding karma is empowerment, not guilt. When you understand how intention shapes your mind, you realize you're not helpless. You're not simply the victim of circumstances or the product of your past. In every moment, you have the opportunity to direct your consciousness in a new direction. The compass can be recalibrated. The patterns can be changed. This is what makes the path of transformation possible. If your character were fixed and unchangeable, there would be no point in practice, no possibility of awakening. But because your mind is constantly being shaped by intention, and because you can learn to work skillfully with intention, genuine transformation becomes possible. So karma is not a cosmic system of justice. It's a mirror showing you the direction you're moving in. It's a tool for understanding how consciousness evolves. And most importantly for our investigation, it's the force that determines what happens at the moment of death. The intentions you've cultivated throughout your life, the patterns you've reinforced through countless choices, these are what will shape the arising of consciousness after death. Part 3. The Landscapes of Mind. Having understood that consciousness is shaped by intention rather than being a fixed self, we can now explore what Buddhism describes as the realms of rebirth. But we need to approach this carefully because these realms are often misunderstood as literal physical places, like different planets or dimensions scattered across the cosmos. The truth is more subtle and more psychological than that. The Buddhist cosmology describes 6 primary realms, but these are better understood as states of consciousness, as landscapes of mind that arise based on the predominant quality of one's intentions and actions. They are not destinations you travel to, but experiences you generate from within. Start with the lower realms. The hell realm, in Buddhist understanding, is not a place of eternal damnation created by an angry God. It is the lived reality of a mind consumed by hatred, rage, and aggressive reactivity. Think about moments in your own life when you've been overwhelmed by anger. Time seems to slow down. Everything feels oppressive, burning, unbearable. Your entire world becomes colored by that hatred. That's a glimpse of the hell realm, right here in human existence. In its extreme form, at the time of rebirth, a consciousness so thoroughly conditioned by hatred and violence would naturally arise into an experience characterized by that same quality, intense suffering and torment. Not because someone is punishing that consciousness, but because that's the natural expression of a mind saturated with those qualities. The hell realm is what a hateful mind experiences. It's self-creating, self-perpetuating suffering. The hungry ghost realm represents a different kind of torment, the anguish of insatiable craving. Imagine a mind that grasps at everything but can never be satisfied. No matter how much it gets, it always wants more. It's constantly hungry, but can never truly digest or enjoy what it consumes. We see this pattern in addiction, in compulsive consumption, in the desperation of those who chase pleasure but find only emptiness. A consciousness thoroughly conditioned by greed and insatiable desire would, after death, naturally arise into an experience characterized by that same quality, always reaching, never satisfied, perpetually tormented by unfulfilled longing. This is not a punishment imposed from outside. It's the natural manifestation of that particular configuration of mind. The animal realm represents consciousness dominated by ignorance, fear, and instinct, without the capacity for reflection or understanding, operating purely on survival impulses, driven by immediate needs and threats. Again, you can observe this quality within your own experience during moments of profound confusion or panic, when the higher faculties of mind shut down and you're operating on pure reactivity. These lower realms, while traditionally presented as literal rebirths, function simultaneously as psychological states we can experience even in human life. They are not somewhere else. They are ways of being, modes of consciousness that arise based on conditions. The higher realms follow the same principle. The heaven realm, or Deva realm, represents states of joy and ease born from generous, ethical, and wholesome conduct. A mind that has cultivated kindness, given freely, acted with integrity, naturally inclines toward experiences of lightness, beauty, and pleasure. After death, such a consciousness would arise into experiences characterized by those same qualities. But here's something crucial. Even the heaven realms are temporary in Buddhist understanding. They are not eternal paradise. They are conditioned states, and like all conditioned states, they eventually pass. A consciousness born into heavenly pleasure might spend vast amounts of time in that state, but eventually, when the karmic force that generated that experience is exhausted, that state will end, and a new state will arise based on whatever karmic patterns remain.
This is why Buddhism doesn't see rebirth in heaven as the ultimate goal. It's pleasant, yes, but it's still part of the cycle of conditioned existence. It's still subject to change and loss.
What makes the human realm special, according to Buddhist teaching, is its balance. Human life contains both pleasure and pain, ease and difficulty. We're not so overwhelmed by suffering that we have no capacity for reflection, like beings in the lower realms, but we're also not so intoxicated by pleasure that we become complacent, like beings in the heaven realms. This balance creates what the Buddha called the middle way, the optimal conditions for awakening. We have just enough suffering to motivate us to seek liberation, but just enough capability and resources to actually walk the path. This is why the human birth is considered precious in Buddhism, not because humans are spiritually superior, but because this particular configuration of experience provides the best opportunity for transformation. For those who engage deeply with meditation, the cosmology becomes even more detailed. The Abhidhamma texts describe 31 distinct planes of existence, arranged according to the level of consciousness they reflect. These range from the sensual realms, where beings experience physical pleasure and pain, through increasingly refined states associated with meditative absorption. Someone who masters the first jhana, a state of deep meditative concentration, characterized by joy and pleasure born of seclusion, may be reborn into what's called the Brahma world. This is not a reward in the conventional sense. It's simply the natural continuation of that particular state of consciousness. A mind that has learned to stabilize in that refined state of awareness would, after death, naturally arise into a realm characterized by that same quality. In these higher meditative realms, beings don't have physical bodies as we know them. Their form, to the extent they have one, is made of what Buddhism calls mind matter, a subtle materiality that reflects the refinement of their consciousness. They exist in states of profound peace and clarity, far removed from the grosser experiences of the sensual realms. Beyond even these are the formless realms, where even subtle materiality dissolves. These represent the highest states of meditative absorption, infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, and neither perception nor non-perception. In these higher realms, consciousness exists in almost pure awareness, with minimal mental activity, experiencing vast expanses of peace and stillness. But even these exalted states, the Buddha taught, are still conditioned. Even the highest formless realm, the peak of meditative achievement, is still within samsara, still subject to arising and passing away. A being born into these realms might abide there for inconceivably long periods, but eventually, when the karmic force sustaining that state is exhausted, they will fall back into lower realms. This reveals something profound about the nature of existence. There is no permanent resting place within conditioned reality. No matter how refined or pleasant a state might be, if it's based on conditions, it will eventually change. This is why the Buddha's teaching doesn't stop at describing better and better rebirths. It points towards something unconditioned, something beyond the entire cycle. The key insight here is that all these realms are expressions of mind. They arise based on the principle of dependent origination. When certain causes and conditions come together, certain effects arise. A mind full of hatred gives rise to hellish experiences. A mind of deep stillness gives rise to refined, peaceful states. These are not arbitrary. They follow natural law. This means the seeds of every possible rebirth already exist within your current consciousness. In moments of rage, you're touching the hell realm. In moments of generosity and joy, you're touching the heaven realm. In moments of deep meditative stillness, you're touching the refined realms of form and formlessness. These are not metaphors, they are direct experiences of different qualities of consciousness. And this understanding completely reframes the question of rebirth. You're not asking, what place will I go to? You're asking, what quality of consciousness am I cultivating? What kind of mental landscape am I generating through my intentions and actions right now? The landscape after death is the landscape you're creating in this very moment through the quality of your mind. This is why transformation is not about preparing for some distant future. It's about understanding what your mind is doing right now, in this present moment, and learning to work skillfully with it.
Part 4. The Final Moment. We now come to one of the most precise and detailed aspects of Buddhist psychology: what happens in the actual process of dying. This is not speculation or metaphysics. It's a careful analysis of the mental and physical events that occur when life ends, drawn from the Abhidhamma, the Buddhist philosophical system that examines consciousness in extraordinary detail. Death, in Buddhist understanding, is a transition, not an ending. To understand this transition, we need to look at both the physical and mental processes that unfold in those final moments. Let's start with the body. Buddhism analyzes physical form as a combination of 4 elements: earth, water, fire, and air. These don't refer to literal dirt, liquid, heat, and wind, but to qualities of matter. Earth represents solidity and resistance. Water represents cohesion and fluidity. Fire represents temperature and energy. Air represents movement and oscillation. As death approaches, these elements begin to dissolve in sequence. The earth element weakens first. This manifests as a feeling of heaviness, as if the body is sinking or becoming impossibly dense. The body loses its solidity, its capacity to hold itself up. Next, the water element dissolves. Moisture dries up. The mouth becomes parched. The lips crack. The eyes can no longer produce tears. The cohesive quality that holds the body together begins to fail. Then the fire element cools. Body temperature drops. Warmth recedes from the extremities toward the core, and eventually even that central warmth fades. The metabolic fire that sustained life is going out. Finally, the air element dissolves. Breathing becomes labored, irregular, shallow. Each breath is a struggle, and then the breath stops. The movement that characterized living matter ceases. This physical dissolution is observable and documented. But what makes the Buddhist analysis unique is its attention to what's happening mentally during this process. Because if the mind remains relatively clear, if it's not clouded by heavy medication or overwhelmed by pain and panic, something remarkable can occur in those final moments. As the body is shutting down, the mind can become extraordinarily lucid. This clarity is not random. It's precisely because the mind is disengaging from the overwhelming demands of maintaining the body. As physical sensation diminishes, mental awareness can sharpen. In this heightened state, what Buddhism calls a karmic impression can arise. This is not something you choose or control. It appears spontaneously based on your past actions and the tendencies you've cultivated throughout your life. The Buddhist texts describe 3 types of impressions that can manifest at death. The first is kama, a vivid memory of a significant action from your life. For someone who performed a major act of generosity, that moment might replay with startling clarity. For someone whose life was marked by violence, a memory of that violence might arise. The second type is kama nimitta, a symbolic image related to your habitual patterns or profession. A surgeon might see scalpels. A gardener might see plants. A butcher might see knives and blood. These symbols reflect the mental grooves that were worn deep through repetition throughout life. The third type is Gati Nimitta, a sign of the next state of being. This is the most mysterious of the three. It might be a visual image of the realm you're about to be reborn into, or it might be a non-visual sense of that state, like a feeling of expansiveness for the formless realms, or a feeling of heaviness for the lower states. But here's what's crucial. The appearance of these visions is not what determines your next birth. The determining factor is what happens next, in the split-second mental activity that follows the vision. According to the Abhidhamma, after the karmic impression appears, there's a rapid series of thought moments called Maranasana Javana. 7 consecutive flashes of consciousness arise in immediate succession. These thought moments are ethically potent. They are either wholesome or unwholesome, skillful or unskillful. This is where a lifetime of practice can make a decisive difference. Even if a frightening or negative vision appears, if these 7 thought moments are wholesome, characterized by clarity, acceptance, and peace, they can override the negative karmic impression. The mind doesn't grasp at the vision, doesn't resist it, doesn't collapse into fear or regret. It remains steady, equanimous, clear. On the other hand, if these thought moments are unwholesome, characterized by grasping, aversion, confusion, or panic, they amplify negative karmic patterns and set the trajectory for a more difficult rebirth.
If no particularly strong vision arises at all, then the mind falls back on habitual karma, the deep grooves of tendency that have been reinforced throughout life. This is why the quality of your daily mind matters so much. The habits you cultivate in ordinary moments become the automatic responses in extraordinary moments, like death. After these 7 thought moments pass, the final mental event of this life occurs. It's called Kuti-citta, the death consciousness. This is completely passive, receptive, non-volitional. It simply registers whatever object was present in the preceding moments. It's like a final witness, a last moment of awareness, conditioned by all that came before. And this is crucial to understand. The Kuti-citta is not a soul leaving the body. It's not an entity departing for another location. It is simply the last moment of this particular stream of consciousness, the final ripple in this particular pattern of awareness. It is a result, not a cause. It's what Buddhism calls vipaka, a karmic result rather than a karmic action. And then, immediately, with absolutely no gap, no interval, no moment of non-existence, a new consciousness arises. This is the patisandhi vijnana, the rebirth linking consciousness. This new consciousness takes the same object as the death consciousness. It's conditioned by the karma that shaped those final moments. But it's not the same consciousness continuing. It's a new arising, caused by the previous moment, but not identical to it. This is where the Buddha's teaching of dependent origination becomes vitally important. Nothing is transferred from one life to the next. No soul, no essence, no substance moves from here to there. Instead, there's a lawful causal relationship. The last moment of one life creates the conditions for the first moment of the next life, just as one candle can light another candle without any flame actually traveling between them. The rebirth consciousness arises in whatever realm corresponds to the karmic patterns that were predominant at death. If the final moments were characterized by hatred and violence, consciousness arises in experiences reflecting those qualities. If they were characterized by generosity and peace, consciousness arises in experiences reflecting those qualities. This entire process happens with extraordinary speed and lawfulness. There's no judgment, no external force deciding where you should go. It's pure cause and effect. the natural unfolding of conditions giving rise to results. This understanding explains why Buddhist traditions place such emphasis on the conditions surrounding death. Creating a peaceful environment for someone who is dying is not just compassionate, it's practical. A calm, supportive atmosphere can help the dying person maintain clarity and equanimity in those crucial final moments. Agitation, chaos, intense grief displayed by loved ones, these can disturb the dying person's mind and make it harder for them to remain steady. The mind at death is extraordinarily sensitive and impressionable. Even small disturbances can have significant effects.
This is also why many Buddhist traditions encourage specific practices at the time of death: recollection of wholesome actions, contemplation of the Buddha's teachings, cultivation of loving kindness. These are not superstitions. They are techniques for directing the mind toward wholesome states in those decisive final moments. The Buddha taught explicitly in suttas like the Mahakama Vibhanga that the mental state at death truly matters. A lifetime of good actions can be undermined by a terrible state of mind at death, though this is relatively rare. More commonly, a lifetime of habitual patterns culminates in a death that reflects those patterns. This is not meant to create fear, but to inspire practice. It's an encouragement to work with your mind now, while you have the capacity, while you're healthy and functioning, rather than waiting until the last moment when mental clarity may be compromised by pain, fear, or physical deterioration. The message is clear. The mind you cultivate today is the mind you'll have at death. The peace you develop now is the peace you'll draw upon then. The clarity you nurture in ordinary moments is the clarity that will guide you through that extraordinary transition.
Part 5. Beyond All Maps. We've now traveled through an extensive investigation. We've looked at the illusion of a permanent self and found only a flowing process. We've examined karma and seen how intention shapes consciousness. We've explored the realms of rebirth and understood them as landscapes of mind. We've witnessed the precise mechanics of death and rebirth, the final moments when one pattern of consciousness gives rise to the next. All of this brings us to a confrontation with the original question: where do you go after death? And now we can give the most accurate answer: nowhere. This answer might seem strange, even disappointing. We want a clear destination, a specific place we can picture. But the language of going, traveling, arriving, these are all conventional designations, useful for everyday communication, but ultimately misleading when applied to the deepest truths of existence. What actually happens is this: consciousness, shaped by karma, ends one chapter and immediately begins another. But there's no traveler making the journey. There's no soul packing up and moving to a new location. There's simply the lawful arising of a new pattern of experience based on the conditions present in the final moments of the previous pattern. It's more accurate to say that a new movie starts playing on the same screen than to say someone travels to a new theater. The screen of awareness remains, but the content changes based on karmic conditions. This understanding completely transforms the question. It's no longer about predicting where you'll end up. It's about understanding what kind of experience you're generating right now, through the quality of your consciousness in this present moment. Every realm we've discussed, from the lowest hells to the highest formless absorptions, every single one of them is still within what Buddhism calls samsara. This word is often translated as the cycle of birth and death, but it means something more precise: the continuous wandering through conditioned states driven by ignorance and craving. Even the most blissful heaven realm
even the most refined meditative state, even the most exalted rebirth possible, all of these are temporary. They arise based on causes and conditions, and when those causes and conditions are exhausted, they pass away. There is no permanent resting place anywhere within conditioned existence. This might sound bleak, but it's actually the opposite. It's liberating. Because it means the Buddha didn't just map out the cycle, he showed the way out of it. That way out is called nibbana, often translated as nirvana. This word literally means extinguishing or blowing out, like a flame being extinguished. But what's being extinguished is not life itself, not consciousness itself, but the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion that keep the cycle of suffering spinning. The Buddha was very clear about this in the Udana, one of the early texts. He said, "There is, monks, a realm where there is no earth, no water, no fire, nor wind, neither this world nor the next, neither sun nor moon. This, I say, is the end of suffering." This is not describing nothingness or annihilation. It's pointing to something unconditioned, something not dependent on causes and conditions, something beyond the entire framework of birth and death. Nibbana is not a place you go to after death. It's a realization you awaken to right here, in the midst of conditioned existence, that frees you from being bound by conditions. This is what makes Buddhism unique among spiritual traditions. It doesn't promise a better rebirth or a pleasant afterlife. It offers something far more radical: complete liberation from the entire cycle of conditioned existence. But how do you realize this? How do you move from being trapped in the cycle to being free? The Buddha's answer was practical and systematic. He taught what's called the Noble Eightfold Path, a comprehensive training that addresses every aspect of human life. The path begins with wisdom, with right view and right intention. Right view means understanding the nature of suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path to its cessation. It means seeing clearly how the mind creates its own suffering through clinging and confusion. Right intention means directing the mind away from harmful patterns toward beneficial ones, cultivating thoughts of renunciation, goodwill, and compassion. From wisdom, the path moves to ethics, to right speech, right action, and right livelihood. This is not morality imposed from outside, but practical guidelines for reducing harm and cultivating wholesome states. When you speak truthfully, you don't have to maintain elaborate deceptions that stress the mind. When you act with integrity, you don't carry the burden of guilt and regret. When your livelihood doesn't involve harming others, your mind remains clearer and more at ease. These ethical foundations create the stability necessary for deeper practice. They're not just rules to follow, they're training grounds for transforming habitual patterns. The path culminates in meditation, in right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Right effort means working intelligently with your mental states, abandoning unwholesome patterns, preventing new ones from arising, cultivating wholesome patterns, and maintaining those that are beneficial. Right mindfulness means clear present moment awareness of body, feelings, mind, and mental objects. Right concentration means developing the mind's capacity for steady, focused attention.
These are not abstract concepts. They're practices you can engage with directly, starting right now. You don't need to wait for perfect conditions. You don't need to become someone else first. The path begins with this moment, with this breath, with this intention. Ask yourself right now, what is the quality of my mind? Is there grasping or spaciousness? Is there aversion or acceptance? Is there confusion or clarity? This simple inquiry, repeated throughout the day, begins to cultivate the awareness that leads to transformation. Notice your intentions before you act. When you're about to speak, pause for just a fraction of a second and notice, what is the intention behind these words? Am I speaking to help or to harm? To connect or to dominate? To express truth or to manipulate? This momentary pause, this brief flash of awareness, is the beginning of freedom. It's the space where choice becomes possible, where you're no longer completely identified with habitual reactions. The same applies to every aspect of life. Before you eat, notice the intention. Is it genuine hunger or compulsive craving? Before you reach for your phone, notice the intention. Is it purposeful engagement or restless escape? Before you think about someone, notice the intention. Is it kind or judgmental? These micro-moments of awareness accumulate. They create new grooves in consciousness, and gradually, the automatic, reactive patterns that have shaped your life begin to loosen their grip. This is the real answer to the question of death and rebirth. It's not about securing a good destination after this life ends. It's about transforming the quality of consciousness right now, in this present moment. Because in the end, there is no fixed destination. There's only this unfolding stream of experience, moment by moment, shaped by the quality of mind you bring to it. The future is not somewhere else. It's being created right now, in the intentions you hold, the awareness you cultivate, the patterns you reinforce or release. Death is not some distant event you need to prepare for decades from now. Death is happening continuously. Every moment, the previous moment dies. Every thought passes away to make room for the next. The person you were yesterday is gone. The person you'll be tomorrow hasn't yet arisen. All that exists is this present moment, this current configuration of consciousness. And in this moment, you have the power to shape what arises next, not through force or struggle, but through clear seeing, through understanding the lawful relationship between cause and effect in the realm of mind. This is the path the Buddha discovered and taught, not a path to somewhere else, but a path to waking up right here, to seeing clearly what has always been true, to releasing the grasping and confusion that create suffering, and to resting in the unconditioned peace that lies beyond all maps and destinations. The journey begins now, not after death, not in some future rebirth, but in this breath, this moment, this intention. That is where transformation happens. That is where freedom is found. And that is the deepest answer to the question of where you go after death. You are always right here, in this present moment, and the quality of this moment determines everything.